Ace Attorney is a series where you play as a defense lawyer and you must investigate crime scenes, find evidence, and use that evidence to find contradictions in people's testimonies to defend your client in court. You know, when I think about it, it's a miracle that this series found any kind of success. If you tried to convince someone to play this based on that description alone, they'd probably think you're someone who's like really into accounting. You know, why play as this or this? Well, instead you could play as this. But against all odds, it found success, and not just a small success, but a fairly okay-sized one. Has 6 main games, 4 spin-offs, a crossover, an anime, plenty of stage shows, some manga, drama CDs, and even a pachinko machine. It's weird because the games themselves don't really sell gangbusters, especially compared to Capcom's other series, yet it's the only one to seemingly get the most attention, at least when it comes to multimedia adaptations. This also includes a movie. Yeah, Ace Attorney had a movie. It was made in 2012, the same year the world was supposed to end, and did. It was produced by Nippon Television Network, and it was directed by Takashi Miike, who directed movies like Shinjuku Triad Society, which showed off his style of blood and gore. Apparently a lot of his movies were known to be like very bloody. They're like the Japanese equivalent of Saw, and Saw 2, and Saw 3, and Saw 4, and Saw 5, and Saw 6, and Saw 3D, and Jigsaw, and Spiral. Seems like an odd choice of a director, but maybe he's just like a really big fan of the Ace Attorney series, I don't know. There are also 2 writers for this movie, the first one being Takaharu Sakurai and Sachiko Aguchi. Takaharu previously worked on shows such as Is it obvious that I can't speak Japanese? Abu Shiruzu, X-Day, and Ataru, which are both crime shows, so he seemed like a pretty good pick to bring on aboard to the project. Sachiko worked on Kaiju 2 in 2011, and that's it. Seemingly, I can't find any other info on the person aside from that, so I guess this is her only major writing contribution. Maybe she was like someone who always wanted to be a writer, but then after doing it for 2 movies, realized it wasn't really her passion and went on to do something else, like becoming a car dealer or something. The movie opens up with a woman who's going through this spiritual ritual trying to summon Gregory Edgeworth, who is in hell, to tell them who shot and killed him, in which he replies with Yanni Yogi. I want you to imagine the individual who's never played Ace Attorney before hearing of this movie about a defense lawyer trying to defend their client. They go in to watch it and you're greeted with this opening scene. I'd be so confused. I think I'd walk into the screening of Harry Potter and the well-dressed man in hell. After that opening, we're both introduced to Phoenix Wright and Miles Edgeworth. What I like is that they take the first and third cases from those games and uses them as introductions for these characters. Phoenix is a rookie lawyer going through his first trial in a courtroom that's also being used as a laundry room, and Edgeworth is shown pinning down this woman in a very professional and calm manner, and in a courtroom that's not being used as a makeshift cleaning room. I think it's clever because in the grand scheme of things, those cases didn't really play into the main plot of the story. The first case is just there to introduce like the characters and the game mechanics and such, and the third case is just there to have another trial Phoenix to go through, because if he doesn't take cases, then he won't get any money, and he won't be able to pay the bills and get kicked out and lives on the streets. So repurposing them in this way I think is really clever. I will say though, I do wish they spent more time on the first case for reasons I'll get into later. We're also introduced to Mia, who saves the trial and helps Larry Butts get a not guilty verdict. Larry gifts Mia her ultimate demise, and then we jump over to Edgeworth, who's talking with his mentor, Manfred von Karma. In the games, Manfred is a very ruthless man. It's also kind of a dick, always mocking you, acting like he owns the place, like some kind of big shot. But in the movies, they made him somewhat more stoic. He's not necessarily nice, but he seems respectable. He even shakes Phoenix's hand before going into court. Game Manfred would never have done that, and if he did, he probably would have like secretly spit in it beforehand, or have one of those prank shocker things. I like this change. I don't necessarily think he's better than the game version, but I think having him more relaxed works better for this kind of story. In the game, Manfred basically acted as the game's final boss, so they wanted to basically make him a more ruthless Edgeworth, but since we get to see him before then, and pretty much acting as the main prosecutor of the movie over Edgeworth, I think this change makes sense. After Edgeworth is done speaking with Von Karma, we see him rub his shoulder. Now you may be wondering why I brought that up. We then see Mia pray to Larry's clock and gets murdered by said clock. I guess I didn't like her tone. This moment kind of leads me to my biggest problem with this movie. Everything moves really fast, and we really don't get to spend time with these characters the same way we do in the games. Now, I know that's not really the movie's fault in that regard, since you're trying to cram 4 cases into a 2.5-hour movie, but it still leads to problems like this where characters die and there's really no weight to it. Like before this, what do we really know about Mia or her relationship with Phoenix or even her own sister? Hell, Phoenix and Mia don't even have a real conversation with each other before her death, so there's really nothing here. Mia dies pretty early on in the games too, but we still get to see her interact with Phoenix like before, during, and after the trial. Maybe for the movie they could have put more focus on the first case and have the beginning part move towards the climax as we learn more about Maya. Speaking of Maya, Phoenix finds her there after discovering Mia's dead body and picking up the murder weapon with his bare hands like a Neanderthal. She gets arrested for Mia's murder after a witness claims it was her, and Phoenix decides to defend her. He gets the autopsy from Gumshoe, and we immediately jump into the trial. It really does feel like I'm watching a TLDR of the games in movie form. That's not how you pronounce that name, you idiot. Yeah, for the sub, they decided to use the English names, or at least it did for the version I got, which was off the Google Play Store since I'm a cheap bitch. So it is possible that they handle the subtitles differently on like the official DVD or something, but this is the way I experienced it, so I'm going to talk about it. You see, when the Ace Attorney games were translated from Japan, they decided to change the location from Japan to America, and change all the names to English. They did this because all the Japanese names were puns, but that would be lost on an American audience, so they made English ones for all the characters. For the subtitles of the movie, they kept the English name, but the setting and everything surrounding it was set back into Japan, which I understand was necessary. These are the names that people in the West here know these characters by, but there's no way you're gonna convince anyone that this takes place in Los Angeles. Look at all these American citizens in this American city. Look at this American school talking about American money. So they had to make this compromise, so now we have a bunch of Japanese people walking around with English names. It's not that big of a deal, but it is just like a little bit funny. After Phoenix and Edgeworth have their encounter, we quite abruptly have a flashback to when Larry, Phoenix, and Edgeworth were kids, and how Edgeworth wanted to become a defense attorney, just like his dad, but he became a prosecutor in the future, which leads people to wonder what happened. We enter the trial of Mia's murder, and Gumshoe gives his testimony with this huge contraption presenting holograms of the evidence. You know, sometimes I forget that these games are supposed to like take place in the future. When the first game was released in 2001, it takes place in 2016, and in the most recent game, it takes place around like 2028. Despite being the future though, the game rarely takes advantage of that. The only instance I could think of is like Athena's emotion thing that has the holograms. Phoenix himself still uses a flip phone 20 years after the iPhone would have been invented. After Gumshoe's testimony, Phoenix finds a contradiction in it, stating that Mia couldn't have written the bloody note with Maya's name on it because she died instantly as stated in her autopsy. This prompts Edgeworth to go, lol, no, and present a new autopsy that states that she was alive several minutes after being struck. This means that Phoenix has to cross-examine this goth hippie pretending to be Wright. Okay, let me talk about the costume designs really quick. I think that they do a pretty good job translating the characters to live action. They all look like they're characters from the games, like unmistakably so. I also like how they didn't just bring them over one for all the characters. Like for example, Phoenix, Miles, and Manfred all look like their video game counterparts, but they're somewhat toned down, made more realistic. Like you could actually see someone looking like this in real life. Meanwhile, characters like Larry or Lotta don't really tone anything down, since they are much goofier and act like comic relief, so their designs reflect that. I think it's really clever. This is all except for Wright, who looks like if someone with colored blindness and also was blind in general made the costume for him. He looks totally different. This is probably because his role in the movie is drastically different from the game. Jumping ahead a bit, but he was someone who was investigating Von Karma, but was eventually blackmailed by him to make him do his bidding. In this case, get a specific DL6 evidence back. Since he's not really a corporate conglomerate, they redesigned him to fit this new role. It works, but it was a little jarring going from this to this. I tried finding out who the costume designer for this movie was, but I couldn't really pin them down. It's not mentioned anywhere online, and I'm sure their names is in the credits somewhere, but I can't read Japanese unfortunately, so that doesn't really work. If someone who watches this video can read Japanese, please tell me which one of these names in the credits is a costume designer so I can properly credit them. It would be much appreciated. We see Phoenix and Edgeworth go back and forth over this clock, all while Phoenix is struggling to keep it together. I really do like Phoenix in this movie. He's constantly worried and sometimes struggles to speak as he tries to think of anything to help his client. Makes a bunch of funny faces. He's really likable. The actor, Hiroki Nirimiya, did a great job here. After pinning Wright, he gets really pissed and pulls out this giant megaphone After pinning Wright, he gets really pissed and pulls out this giant megaphone from somewhere. Where is he keeping that? Was it up his ass? That seems like a really irresponsible place to put that thing. Like, could you imagine if you let out a fart? Everyone would have heard that. He'd never be able to live that down. Edgeworth tells Wright to admit his crime of entering the office and wiretapping it, which puts Phoenix in a bad spot. Not until Maya channels Mia from beyond the grave to tell Phoenix is already winning and essentially gives him the answer and then dips. Gosh, could you imagine being brought back into the world of the living just to tell your dumbass colleague to flip over a sheet of paper? That would be like if I resurrected my grandpa from the dead so he could help me find my car keys. Phoenix ends up winning the trial, setting Maya free, and wrapping all that up quite nicely. Before moving on, I will say I feel like a major part from the games that's missing in the movies is the fun slowly unraveling the mystery yourself. In the games, it's all about piecing together evidence to reach the truth. But the movie really doesn't do that. Like if someone was watching this as their first Ace Attorney experience, would they be able to figure things out before Phoenix does? I don't think they would. This is mostly because there's not really many moments when the characters are actually discussing any of the clues they find. At most, you have Phoenix looking at some documents that flash some really important information for like 2 seconds. Did you catch that? I hope you did, because it's going to be on the bar exam. Anyway, Phoenix decides to look more into the DL6 case and finds out that the victim was actually Miles' father. While that's happening, we see Edgeworth on a boat getting shot at and picks up the gun with his bare hands. Why do these characters keep doing that? Is a murder weapon that compelling? Do they like shiny things? Anyway, this leads to his arrest. Phoenix and Maya find this out on the TV the next day and go to visit him in the dungeon. Phoenix tries to become Edgeworth's lawyer, but Edgeworth tells him that Phoenix knows nothing and that there's much more capable lawyers out in the world that he can find. Gumshoe speaks to Phoenix, who informs him that no one will defend Miles since, he's someone who kind of branded all their clients as guilty, and I guess they're really all super petty about it. So Gumshoe asks Phoenix to defend him. I really like the director's decision to record this conversation in the same place as that one Donkey Kong level. In the next scene, we see the only moment in the movie where Maya even remotely acts like her video game counterpart. Yeah, I feel like out of all the characters, Maya was the one that was really not adapted all that well. She's very stoic, not saying much to lighten the mood. She's kind of boring and really is only there just so she can summon her sister, who even then doesn't do that much. To be fair, you could argue that she doesn't really do all that much in the games either, but she was great for someone to work off of Phoenix. They complemented each other very well and made the investigation segments more fun and engaging. But in the movie, she's just kind of there and offers nothing. She's like a houseplant that can summon ghosts of other houseplants. After yelling, we see Lotta Hart come out and discussing, I think that's Romanian, about the murder last night, and she decides to go to the police to be a witness. After we go back, Edgeworth opens up about his past and how his father died in like the evidence room in the courthouse after getting shot. I like how they changed the murder scene to the evidence room from the elevator in the game, probably since the elevator murder made no sense at all. In the game, Edgeworth, his father, and a third guy all got trapped in an elevator and were stuck in it for so long it started to run out of oxygen. I guess this elevator had no ventilation whatsoever. Very serious design oversight. In a courthouse, no less. Not only that, but there was a window, so if they were running out of air, couldn't they just like break it to get more? You might say that they were between floors and they would just be met with concrete, but no, jumping ahead, Edgeworth shot a bullet and hit someone standing on the other side. So they were on a floor, so why not just break the window? We also find out Phoenix's backstory and why he became Miles' friend. Miles defended him when everyone accused him of stealing Edgeworth's money, and so did Larry. After that, we get to the first courtroom day. We cross-examine Lotta Hart and find out how ruthless Manfred is as a prosecutor, shutting down Phoenix at every turn and even threatening to hold him to contempt of court. I really like how we get to see just the complete contrast between how experienced Manfred is and how much of a green rookie Phoenix is, bumbling his way through these trials. After Lotta makes a slip up and Phoenix catches it, the trial day ends and Lotta Hart fucks off for the rest of the movie. She really doesn't show up a single time after that. Maybe in this universe this court actually punishes perjury rather than giving them a 5-minute timeout and then shortening it to 3 because they felt a little bad. We get a fun little segment of Phoenix looking around aimlessly and examining unrelated objects and hoping to find a clue. It's a nice little poking of fun at the games, it's cute. After that, Phoenix and Maya suddenly run into this old shack. We look around in it for like 20 seconds and then hard cut to the Steel Samurai. Why even have them look at the house if they're not going to find anything themselves? It's just here to establish beforehand for some obvious foreshadowing. But you still could have like fit a 5-minute segment of them talking to like the old man for a little bit. Makes the whole segment feel out of place. We then find out that Gordy was actually the doing of Larry since his wrench broke when inflating the balloon and caused it to pop in the ocean. Did I mention that Larry is the best character in this movie? He's just so goofy. He has these moments where he just kind of pops up in the background and does something because why not? Like there's a segment here where Edgeworth and Phoenix are kind of having a serious conversation. Meanwhile in the movie it's showing Larry fucking around on the lake. It's great. We then begin the second trial day where Von Karma brings in the old boat guy. He testified how he heard gunshots and saw the man talking to himself as well as fluttering. Phoenix tries to say that the testimony is unreliable since the man's memory is faulty and doesn't even know his own name. That doesn't work since the judge is also old and probably doesn't remember his own name, and old people have to stick together, so he allows the testimony and ultimately gives a guilty verdict. After failing, Larry comes to save the day as he remembers that he himself heard the gunshot as well. The judge decides to takesies-backsies his sentence after that. I don't think a judge can do that in real life, can he? Larry states that he was listening to the radio and heard a singular gunshot. He also states how the person on the radio said that it was almost Christmas, which Phoenix is then able to use to prove that Larry's testimony as legit since Lotta's camera took a photo at around 11:50 of seemingly nothing. This causes suspicion, so the judge, feeling betrayed by a fellow old man, decides to have the boat guy take the stand once again to testify. Unfortunately, he's nowhere to be found, seeming to have left the courthouse, most likely to go get some Del Taco. So the trial is pushed back to the final day. Phoenix heads back to the old man's hut where he finds some detailed plans of the murder and then proceeds to get tased. This is a moment that I actually prefer in the movie than in the games. You see, in the visual novel, Phoenix had a weird habit of going up to bad guys and going, "Look at this incriminating piece of evidence I have against you. What are you gonna do about it?" And then, they proceed to do something about it. I can understand like the first and second time. He is new at this whole lawyer thing, even though presenting evidence to the person you suspect, I imagine, was brought up as something you shouldn't do at law school. But maybe they figured they shouldn't have to teach common sense. But by the third time, it was just frustrating. Like, I remember being mad at Phoenix at that moment. The movie version fixed this by simply having Von Karma sneak up on him after he found out. Phoenix is able to deduce that the person who sent the plans to the boat guy and the person who was manipulating Red White is the same person. So Phoenix plans to have Red White take the stand, but unfortunately he won't be available. This is also where Edgeworth opens up about the past, about how he killed his father. After Gregory lost the case against Von Karma, he grew suspicious and went to the evidence room to investigate. A guard found him there and they got into a scuffle. Edgeworth tried to help his dad and proceeds to get his shit wrecked, so he took the gun and threw it, which caused it to fire and killed his dad. Very tragic. The next day starts, but unfortunately Phoenix doesn't have Red White and Yanni Yogi has not been found, so Phoenix stalls. After the judge is ready to announce his verdict, the old man takes the stand and states that he left to go get some food for Polly. Phoenix proceeds to use the name as a parrot to suggest that this man is actually Yanni Yogi, who was accused of killing Gregory Edgeworth and also had a wife named Polly. This isn't enough, so they suggest fingerprints, but the old man don't got any. In desperation, Phoenix suggests having Polly the parrot take the stand, and instead of getting shut down immediately and laughed out of the courtroom, they decide to, go through with it. Polly says some numbers to a safe and like a phone number, which match up to the birth date and marriage dates of Polly, the wife. While this might be incriminating, the judge admits that it's still hard to kind of submit this as evidence. Phoenix, in a last desperate attempt, tries to get Polly to say anything else, and after nearly giving up, the parent says, "I love you, Yanni." This gets Yanni to fully admit his crime of killing Robert Hammond and explains why he did it. When he got in the scuffle with Gregory, everyone believed that it was him who killed the guy. Even though he said that he didn't do it, nobody believed him, not even his own lawyer, Robert Hammond, so he had to argue insanity, which got him off the hook but ruined his life, which ultimately caused his wife to commit suicide. After 15 years, he got a letter about revenge and decided to go along with it. Edgeworth is found not guilty, but Edgeworth decides to confess to the crime 15 years ago about he was the one who actually killed his father. Phoenix and Edgeworth prepare the case on the same day with no prep because, fuck it, no one's got anything better to do, right? In court, Phoenix discusses how there were 2 shots that were fired from the gun, but one was only found. He suggests that the true killer took the bullet. Finding a random stray bullet isn't exactly easy, and Phoenix doesn't have any way to prove that. So it seems like it's over, until... Gosh, with him making sounds like that, you know that this version of Phoenix likes getting choked. Phoenix decides to turn his thinking around and suggest that the killer didn't pick up the bullet, but instead the bullet hit them, and they decide to leave it with it inside. He ultimately accuses Von Karma being the killer, and that the reason he took the day off that one time all those years ago was because he needed to heal. I think it would take more time than 1 day to heal from a bullet wound, but what do I know? I've never been shot. The closest I ever got to something like that was like getting a splinter in my foot. Since Von Karma wouldn't have left an evidence trail, he never saw a doctor to get the bullet removed, so it was probably still inside him, in which Phoenix uses the metal detector to find the stray bullet in Von Karma's shoulder. Von Karma suggests that the bullet is unrelated to the DL6 incidents, and they got it way before then. Phoenix suggests getting the gun from DL6, but it's revealed that the evidence in question has been lost or destroyed. Phoenix gets upset and accidentally destroys the thinking clock he received earlier, which has the bullet from the same incident. Phoenix uses this as evidence, as it would match the bullet in his shoulder. Von Karma proceeds to admit that he was at the scene and got shot, but that he never killed Gregory as he would have no motive. Phoenix suggests that the motive was to silence Gregory, as Von Karma has been forging evidence to win trials. Since the bullet is the same one from the trial Gregory Edgeworth was investigating, Phoenix has the bullet examined, all like really cool like, and proves that the bullet Von Karma presented all those years ago did not match the guns, proving it was fake. This causes Von Karma to have the weirdest breakdown. I didn't edit that. That's just how it is in the movie. But I did edit this. Edgeworth is then found not guilty, and then the movie ends, roll credits. This is a very interesting movie. As an adaptation of the first game, it does a lot trying to stick to the original story as closely as possible, while also changing certain elements to make things just have a little more sense. I do think many of these story changes actually fix some problems with the original game, like the Phoenix tasing scene, how Gregory died. I like how they tied Wright to the overall story rather than just being his own isolated thing. It makes the story feel a little more coherent, and I like that a lot. The tone from the games is very different as well. In the games, there are moments of tension and drama, but most of it was very lighthearted with constant banter and over-the-top characters. But in the movie, it's the opposite. It still has moments of goofiness, but they're more reserved for the most part. This does make some certain moments awkward though, like when we're cross-examining Wright, it's pretty serious, but then suddenly he pulls out the megaphone, and it's like complete tonal whiplash. It doesn't really happen often, but there's a few that stuck out like a sore thumb. I also think that Gumshoe and especially Mile were not handled well. Mile is completely pointless, and Gumshoe just kind of seems like your average detective. Nothing really stands out. I think the biggest problem with the movie though is its pacing. Even when kind of removing 2 cases from the game and only having the other 2 remain, there's still moments where it feels like things moved way too fast. We never get to truly know Mai in the movie because of this, which kind of sucks. The final case also decides to do all 3 days of investigating and all 3 days of trial, technically 4. So we go from investigating to courthouse, back to investigating, back to courthouse, back to investigating, back to the courthouse. It's not very well handled. It makes me think that it would have been better if they just adapted one case from the games into the movie, like Rise from the Ashes or Farewell My Turnabout.
In the end though, I still think it was a very enjoyable movie. It's clear just from watching that a lot of care was put into it, from the costume design to the story to the casting choices to the jokes and references. That's what makes this movie fun for me to watch. There was a very clear effort put into the movie to deliver something that fans of the franchise would want. It is admittedly not something that I could see a lot of newcomers getting any enjoyment out of, but I think that the movie producers already knew this, and instead of trying to attract a mass audience, they simply concerned themselves with satisfying the audience that was already there. If you're a fan, I would recommend it. You can easily find it online, just don't buy it off of eBay. I did that once and got sent a package with Ace Ventura: Pet Detective.